tells me that your future is as important to me as my future. In some respects, the same way I would gladly cash in my pension if my son needed to go to the doctor, that I was that connected. That blew my mind. I did not expect to be that connected. That was the title last week, Blow Your Mind. This week I'm going to break your heart, or break my heart, as the case may be. Because I'm asking whether the organization we have is equal to the future we face, just as our finances aren't going to be sustainable. I'm wondering, is our organization, the way we do church, is that sustainable? And like I did last week, I'm going to start with a story. Last week I was all about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You liked that. That was fun. This one is not quite as much fun, but it'll be meaningful. I'm quoting now. I'm reading verbatim from someone else's words. First of all, there was a kitchen table which stood in a brownstone house which still bears the number 182 Clinton Street, Brooklyn, New York, said Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He goes on. In those days, there were but 6 steps. We admitted we couldn't run our lives. We got honest with ourselves. We made a self-survey. We made restitution to the people we had harmed. We tried to carry this story on to the next, and we asked God to help us do those things. That was the essence of the message over the kitchen table. Hold on to that. Something is changing in the big, bad world of church. Fewer people go now. Fewer people join now. Not one or two, not just the liberal churches. Everybody is watching people go away, or at least not turn up. Yeah, it started with the mainline Protestants, and everybody said, well, since they got so liberal, people are abandoning them. But it turns out that curve is affecting everyone. Apparently, we're changing as a society. It even affects Jewish communities, so it's not a Christian dilemma either. Oh, yeah, there are exceptions, and we always think, well, I'll be the exception, the same way we buy the lottery ticket and figure, yeah, I'm more likely to be struck by lightning, but in this case, I know I'll win. But that's not healthy thinking. We know that. If you follow the numbers, if you read Nate Silver's 538, if you're a sensible human being, you will know that the end of the century will look very different for religion than it did at the beginning of the century. And I predict, and I can do this safely because I will be dead, that by the end of this century there will be vastly fewer houses of worship throughout the United States. Some will measure this a tragedy, others will measure this a victory, but it will be a fact. And the question I'm asking is, will we be one of them? And if we aren't, is that what we are or aren't? Can we choose that fate? And I believe, as you may have suspected already, that the answer to keeping our faith alive starts at that kitchen table in Brooklyn in 1933. A colleague of mine has said that Alcoholics Anonymous is the true church. It's the place where people go to be transformed and are transformed. They find a place where their shames are understood, their fears are accepted, their sorrows are shared. No one judges you for having failed, but all are held accountable to a goal of sobriety. They are equal before God and themselves. The rules are simple, if they are in fact demanding. They are firm, but they are fair. But unlike a church, no group is larger than 50. They barely have an organization, hardly a budget, and they've built nary a building in over almost 100 years. Now, ask me how many people belong to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the answer is 2 million. American church life has defined itself through 3 M's. The 3-letter M's. This is your mnemonic for today. Marble, members and money. The more of those you have, the more successful you are. I've been to many a church and clergy meeting where building projects, membership drives, and budget surpluses were the subject of conversation. Why, we took in 700 members just last week. We're expanding our campus to the size of Rhode Island. Our budget now equals that of Connecticut. There's a little bit of testicular activity there, I would point out. But the reality is, we measure church in some ways the way we measure business. Bigger is better. Big church, big members, big buildings, big. Don't you remember the commercial about cars? We like things big in America. But what if we weren't like that? Which is not to say small, but what if we weren't focused on marble, members, and money? What if we were focused on the two other M's, mission and ministry? That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. They don't care how many people come. They don't care how many dollars they have. They don't even own a building. They're about sobriety. What if we began to think about our future, our success, our hope as being mission and ministry? And to help us along, here comes the other story this morning. It's the one you heard earlier about Peter and John who were going up to Samaria. Now, Samaria is a place that turns up in the Bible a lot. It's a group of people who were part of the original Jewish kingdom, but there was a civil war after the death of Solomon, and the kingdoms pulled apart. And eventually the ones in the north were overrun by Assyrians, and those people became the northern community called Samaria. The southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, from which we get the word Jew, and in which the city of Jerusalem lives, endures as the faith we call Judaism. But there are still Samaritans, and there's still a place called Samaria. They live there. There are about 1,000 left. They have a temple. They have a high priest. They celebrate Passover. Nobody likes them. They're not Jewish enough for the Jews. They're not Muslims. They won't leave, given all the political people who are there. But I'm here to point out that even in the time of Jesus, they were outcasts, which means the story of the Good Samaritan has a whole different meaning, and I'll explain that another day. But Jesus goes into Samaria first, and in the book of Acts, that's the place where the gospel first goes, is to Samaria. But the Samaritans, well, they're icky. They don't follow all the right rules. They're not really Jews, and Jesus was a Jew, and all the community left over after Jesus died was Jewish, and yet here are the people in Samaria claiming to believe in Jesus. What do we do with them? And the book of Acts is very clear. Peter and John went to them. What I want you to notice is that unlike church growth, which says, how can we get them to come to us? In the first generation of Christianity, the message is, how can we go to them? Bill Wilson modeled Alcoholics Anonymous on a Christian group, later called the Moral Rearmament effort. But it started as a conscious effort to imitate the first Christians, the Peters, the Johns, the Simons, to, as they put it, live in a group with no hierarchy, no temples, no endowments, no salaries. It declared itself not to be an organization, but an organism. And they had 4 spiritual practices: sharing of our sins with another Christian, surrendering our life, past, present, and future, into God's keeping, restitution to those who we have wronged, listening for God's. Do you hear Alcoholics Anonymous right in the middle of it? Exactly. Same principles. So I'm giving you 2 ideas I want you to ponder. And they're not new ones, obviously. 2 ancient ones, in fact. One is the spiritual power of a small group. That which Alcoholics Anonymous understands. If you get much above 20, the connection gets lost. The personal gets lost. The intimacy gets lost. 20-some years ago, Sue Cinnamon, who served this church as education minister, created a group of women's spirituality groups. They were wonderfully successful. Some of them are still alive today because the intimacy of that connection powered them along. 10 years ago, Brent Smith constituted another sort of small group ministry for the purpose of exploring liberal religion face-to-face, and one or two of those groups are still going. When I got here 8 years ago, we started a couple of in-house small group ministries. They're called connections groups for the same purpose of finding a way to connect face-to-face, not just in a big hall like this. It's a very appealing thing. Small groups, where you know the other person, are where Diana Eck's experience of intimacy and ultimacy come together. You can have an awesome experience in church, but you're all by yourself. You can have an intimate experience with someone, but it could be so private as to exclude the ultimate. It's only in a spiritual community that the intimate and the ultimate, the horizontal and the vertical, can meet. That's what makes Alcoholics Anonymous work, because it is a spiritual community devoted to a focused purpose. People want that. They want something more from their lives, from their experiences. They want something that I say is almost like heartbreak. They want someone, somewhere, somehow to be able to listen to their failures, their sins, their mistakes, their errors, their disappointments, their shames, their defeats, and not be judged, not be pushed to one side. In fact, they want that person to say, been there, know where you've been, I'm right with you. They want that connection, and they want it to go beyond sharing misery. They want to say, how can we move forward in our lives? How can we get direction? And they do it together. In Leonard Cohen's song Tradition, you may know the anthem, you may know the chorus. It ends, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. We all want to bring our cracked souls, our cracked hearts, our broken selves somewhere where the light can get in and the light in us can get out. A generation ago, all those megachurches discovered this and created small groups everywhere. They prospered like mad. But of course, as Sarah Maurice pointed out, sometimes the price of intimacy and ultimacy can be integrity. You have to promise to play by a certain set of rules, and that's a perfectly legitimate way to go. But for those of us who can't pay that coin, we still have a brokenness that needs to be acknowledged. We still want the cracks to be okay. Of course, the reality is we've always had small groups. We call them committees. I don't know about you, but I'm less excited about committees as spiritual groups than I used to be. Agendas don't seem to have the same spiritual oomph. The reality is we still need them. We also need choirs and classes and other things. Churches for a long time have done ultimacy in worship and intimacy in the boardroom. But what I'm hearing now, what everyone's hearing now is, I want them at the same time. I want to have that three-dimensional moment when I'm connecting this way and that way at the same time. And that's why churches are losing members, because we deliver one or the other, but never both, at least not at the same time. And we're a traditional church in a lot of ways, so we have to be alert to the fact that when people don't stick around, it's not because they don't like our message. We have a fabulous message. They want to engage it in a way we are not equipped to offer, at least.